The Tiger I is one of the most famous tanks of World War II, feared, respected, and often described as Germany's most powerful weapon. On paper, it had everything: thick armor, a devastating gun, and the ability to destroy enemy tanks from long distances. But there's a problem with this image, because in reality, the Tiger was far from perfect. It was expensive, unreliable, and incredibly difficult to maintain. And in many ways, it created more problems than it solved. So was the Tiger really Germany's best tank, or one of its worst decisions? Development of the Tiger I began before World War II as part of German studies on breakthrough tanks. In 1937-1938, prototypes of heavy tanks, Durchbruchswagen, DW program, were tested, followed by VK3001 Future Panther and VK3601 projects. These vehicles were intended for attacking fortified positions, but were not prioritized, as German doctrine focused on fast medium tanks such as Panzer III and Panzer IV. Combat experience in battles in France, Poland, and other countries in 1939 to 1940 confirmed this approach. German forces achieved success in Poland and France without heavy tanks. In fairness, it should be said that the Germans had problems defeating the Allied heavy tanks, especially during the France campaign. But the Reich preferred to solve this by strengthening the armament of existing tanks, and also using the anti-tank and assault self-propelled artillery. The situation changed during preparations for the German invasion of the Soviet Union, when the Wehrmacht identified the need to significantly strengthen its tank fleet. The medium tank Panzer IV in modification, EF, was inferior in key characteristics to the Soviet T-34, classified by Germans at the time as medium-heavy. The Wehrmacht had no equivalent to the KV-1. Limited and experimental projects like the Großtraktor and Neubaufahrzeug are not taken into account. That's why they are experimental, because they never went into serial production due to their inferior characteristics. Combat experience showed that good optics and ergonomics of Germany medium tanks did not compensate for the weak armor and armament of the Panzers III and IV. Increasingly, German forces faced prepared defensive positions, confirming the need for a heavy breakthrough tank. The response followed two directions: modernization of existing tanks, Panzer III and Panzer IV, and accelerated development of a heavy tank comparable to the Soviet KV-1. On May 26, 1941, new requirements for heavy tanks were approved. These included a gun capable of penetrating 100 millimeters of armor at 1.5 kilometers and increased armor protection. Henschel and Porsche received specifications for a 45-ton breakthrough tank. Prototype presentation was scheduled at Rastenburg for April 20, 1942, in honor of Hitler's birthday. Henschel used a conventional layout similar to the Panzer IV and applied an interleaved road wheel suspension developed by famous German engineer Heinrich Kniepkamp, the Themenitz Gries of German mechanical engineering. This improved ride smoothness and firing accuracy on the move. Henschel's prototype was designated VK4501H. Porsche's VK4501P used innovative solutions, including longitudinal torsion bars and an electric transmission. However, it was more complex and required large amounts of scarce materials, especially copper. Despite ongoing trials, Porsche ordered production of chassis components before final approval, with deliveries planned from July 1942, Nibelungenwerk. Such overconfidence on Porsche's part was driven by a well-known phenomenon: lobbying. Ferdinand Porsche, being a close associate of Hitler and relying on his connections within the Reich leadership, believed his project would easily defeat the competitor. However, numerous problems and technical failures, especially the extremely complex and underdeveloped electromechanical transmission, led to repeated breakdowns during testing. Hitler granted Porsche time to fix these issues, but by the time of the trials in April 1942, the patience of the German leadership had run out. A decision was made in favor of a more reliable and practical design, VK4501 Henschel, although, as later experience showed, it was still far from fully refined. But the turret used on early production vehicles was originally designed for the Porsche tank, as Henschel's own turret designs were not ready. Initial plans included a 75mm KWK-42 L70 gun, but by 1942, this caliber was considered insufficient. The final production tank combined the Henschel chassis and hull with the Porsche turret and entered service as the Panzerkampfwagen 6 Tiger. Mass production soon began, but due to the high cost and expensive production, from 1942 to 1944, only 1,347 tanks were produced. Cost per vehicle was about 250,000 Reichsmarks, with a production labor requirement of approximately 300,000 man-hours per tank. For comparison, most numerous Germany tank Panzer IV cost only 100,000 Reichsmarks, with required labor in also 100,000 man-hours, while the best Germany heavy, not truly medium according to fact classification, Panzer V Panther tank cost 120,000 Reichsmarks, and approximately 150,000 man-hours. The Tiger I was controlled using a steering wheel similar to that of a car. The main controls included the steering wheel and 3 pedals: accelerator, clutch, and brake. To the right of the driver's seat were the gear selector and the main parking brake lever. To the left, an auxiliary parking brake lever. Behind the seat on both sides were emergency control levers. Overall, the control system was relatively simple and did not require advanced driver training. The turret of the Tiger I was positioned near the center of the hull, with the turret ring shifted 165 millimeters toward the rear from the hull's central axis. The turret sides and rear were formed from a single bent plate of 82 millimeters armor. The 100 millimeters front plate was welded to the curved side armor. The roof consisted of a single 26 millimeters plate, slightly inclined, 8 degrees at the front, and welded to the sides. The turret roof initially had 3 openings, 2 for hatches and 1 for a ventilator. Later versions had 5 openings. From turret number 184 onward, a loader's periscope was installed on the right side, protected by a steel bracket. From turret number 324, an opening for the Nahverteidigungswaffe, close defense grenade launcher, was added between the loader's hatch and the ventilator. The ventilator was covered by an armored cap with horizontal air slots. Turret height, including commander's cupola, was 1,200 millimeters, mass 11.1 tons. Turrets were manufactured and installed by Wegmann in Kassel. The hull had a variable width layout. The lower hull defined the base width, while the upper hull was widened by side sponsons to accommodate a turret ring of 150 millimeters, the minimum required for mounting an 88 millimeters gun. The floor plate measured 4820 on 2100 millimeters with a thickness of 26 millimeters. Armor thickness: upper hull sides 80 millimeters, rear 80 millimeters, front 100 millimeters. Lower hull sides were reduced to 63 millimeters, partially compensated by the road wheels. Most armor plates were joined at right angles, resulting in predominantly vertical and horizontal surfaces. Exceptions included the front plates. Main front plate 100 millimeters, near vertical 80 degrees, with machine gun and driver's viewport. Upper front plate 63 millimeters, 10 degrees inclination. Lower front plate 100 millimeters, reverse angle of 66 degrees. Armor joints used dovetail interlocking with welding. The turret ring area was initially unprotected and considered a major vulnerability. Later vehicles received an armored ring for protection. Hull roof thickness was 30 millimeters. The armored hull, without turret and running gear, weighed 29 tons. Roof protection was insufficient. Fragments could jam the turret. Overall armor provided a very high level of protection for its time. A documented example: a Tiger from the 503rd Heavy Tank Battalion, Oberleutnant Zabel, sustained 227 hits from 14.5 millimeters anti-tank rifles, 14 hits from 45 and 57 millimeter shells, and 11 hits from 76.2 millimeter shells near Rostov. The tank remained operational and drove 60 kilometers to the rear for repairs. British evaluations of captured Tigers also rated the armor highly. From August 1943, vertical surfaces were coated with Zimmerit to prevent magnetic mines. This coating was discontinued in autumn 1944 because it was useless. The main armament of the Tiger I was the 8.8 centimeters KWK-36, a tank adaptation of the Flak A-1836 anti-aircraft gun. High accuracy resulted from a flat trajectory, high muzzle velocity, and favorable ballistics, combined with precision optics, termed Zielfernrohr TZF-9B by Lights. British tests showed that 5 consecutive shots at 1,100 meters hit a 410-9 460 millimeters target. The gun had a 2-chamber muzzle brake and a modified recoil system compared to the anti-aircraft version. It used a semi-automatic vertical sliding breech block with the operating lever on the right side. Recoil and recuperator cylinders were mounted on both sides of the breech. Firing was electrically initiated. The trigger was integrated into the elevation control handwheel. Safety devices were similar to those on the Panzer IV. Ballistics remained identical to the Flak 1836-37. Barrel length L56. Ammunition consisted of fixed rounds with 88 x 5.70R cases, index 6347 State, adapted for electric ignition. Anti-aircraft ammunition was not directly interchangeable with tank ammunition. Gun length from muzzle brake to breech was 503 millimeters. Barrel length was 4,930 millimeters, 56 calibers, with 4,093 millimeters rifled section. The barrel had 32 right-hand grooves, 3.6 millimeters wide, 5.04 millimeters deep. With the turret forward, the barrel extended 228 millimeters beyond the hull. Spent cases were ejected into a brass chute and collected in a container holding up to 6 cases. The loader had to frequently clear it. Early vehicles used a side hatch for ejection. From turret number 46, this was replaced by an emergency hatch, and cases were removed through the top hatch. Recoil length was 580 millimeters, monitored by an indicator. The gun was initially balanced by a spring mounted on the right side of the turret. On later vehicles, the balancing mechanism was relocated to the left side behind the commander's seat, linking the breech to the turret floor. Recoil and recuperator systems were attached to the trunnions. Unlike the vertical layout on flak guns, they were arranged horizontally, recuperator left, recoil mechanism right. A coaxial MG-34 machine gun was mounted to the right of the main gun. It was aimed together with the gun and fired by the gunner using a foot pedal. Early tanks used standard Cub G-34. Later variants included KWMG 3440, KWMG 34S, and KWMG 34-4. All Tiger I variants were equipped with 12-cylinder gasoline carburetor Maybach engines. The first 250 vehicles used the HL-210, 21.3 liters, 650 horsepower, while later vehicles used the HL-230, 23 liters, 700 horsepower. Fuel, leaded gasoline OZ-74, octane rating 74. Fuel capacity, 530 liters. The lubrication system used Motorenöl der Wehrmacht. The engine held 42 liters of oil. 32 liters were required for replacement. The oil pump was driven by the main engine. The system included an additional 28-liter reservoir. Power was transmitted to the gearbox via a 2-part drive shaft. Approximately 5 horsepower was diverted to the turret traverse mechanism. The engine compartment was equipped with an automatic fire suppression system. At temperatures above 120 degrees Celsius, thermal sensors activated extinguishers located near the fuel pumps and carburetors. Activation triggered a warning light on the driver's dashboard. Cooling system, water radiator with a capacity of 120 liters and 4 fans. Fan drive lubrication required 7 liters of oil. Transmission, 12-speed, 8 forward, 4 reverse. Maybach Olvar, a shaftless preselector gearbox with semi-automatic control. It was integrated with a multi-disc main clutch and the steering system. Steering system, double differential with dual power flow and a 2-stage drive. It provided 16 fixed turning radii forward and 8 in reverse, 2 per gear, as well as neutral steering, pivot turn. Control was via steering wheel. Braking system, independent brakes for each side, operated by 2 levers, used only if the steering mechanism failed. Main braking was performed by a pedal. Final drive, 3-stage reduction. The first stage was a bevel gear transmitting torque from the gearbox to the steering system shaft. The second and third stages consisted of combined cylindrical and planetary gears in the side final drives. Total gear ratio 10.5. The steering mechanism was not part of the reduction system. Suspension of the Tiger tank has individual torsion bar, interleaved, Schachtelhoff work road wheels in 4 rows, 8 per side, designed by Enipkamp. Large diameter road wheels, no return rollers. Drive sprocket located at the front. The idler, 600 millimeters diameter, was connected to the track tensioning mechanism. The drive sprocket, 840 millimeters, was mounted at the front of the hull. Road wheels had independent torsion bar suspension. Torsion bars were mounted transversely across the hull. Wheels of the 2nd, 4th, 6th, and 8th suspension stations belonged to the inner row. Torsion bar length, 160 millimeters, diameter 58 millimeters. Each torsion bar was fixed by an octagonal end in the opposite hull wall. Road wheels on the left side were offset forward relative to the right side. Early vehicles used drive sprockets of the initial type and road wheels with rubber rims. The Tiger tank uses two types of tracks, transport and combat. Each track consisted of 96 links. Links were connected by pins 716 millimeters long and 28 millimeters in diameter. Late production vehicles used road wheels with internal shock absorption and reduced their total number. The Tiger had modern observation equipment that provided good visibility for the crew. Among them was the fixed optical sight mounted to the left of the main gun. Early Tiger I tanks used binocular TZF-9B sights, Zeiss. From April 1944, monocular TZF-9C sights were introduced. The TZF-9B had a fixed magnification of 2.5 times and a field of view of 23 degrees east. The TZF-9C had variable magnification from 2.55 times to 5 times. The sight scale was graduated from 100 meters to 4,000 meters in hectometers, 0.40 oximeter for the main gun, and from 0 to 1,200 meters for the machine gun. The aiming mark was adjusted by rotating a small hand wheel. To effectively conduct combat operations, the Tiger had FUG-5 radio set installed next to the radio operator's seat. It consisted of an SC-10 transmitter, 10 watt, and a UKW EE receiver. Operating frequency range 27.2 to 33.3 megahertz. Communication range up to 6.4 kilometers in voice mode and up to 9.4 kilometers in Morse code. Power supply, 12-volt battery mounted in a box, 3 and 12 on 197 on 176 millimeters, installed on a common frame with the transmitter and receiver. The radio used a standard 2-meter rod antenna, STB at 2M. The antenna base was located at the rear right corner of the fighting compartment roof. All crew members used throat microphones and headphones connected to the internal intercom system. The intercom was vulnerable in combat. Some units experimented with auxiliary light signaling systems to transmit basic commands from the commander to the driver in case of failure. The Tiger I was primarily used as a heavy anti-tank platform. Although originally developed within an offensive doctrine, its real role evolved into countering enemy armored forces and stopping breakthroughs, especially as Germany shifted to defensive operations. Its designed powerful 88mm gun and heavy armor was optimized for long-range tank combat. German doctrine emphasized engaging enemy tanks and anti-tank weapons first, with infantry as a secondary target. Combat experience showed the Tiger could effectively fight at distances of 2,000 meters or more, often before the enemy could respond. Standard practice was to begin engagements beyond 1,000 meters, using range and armor advantage. Organizationally, the Tiger I was deployed in independent heavy tank battalions, Schwere Panzerabteilung. These units were not part of standard divisions, but were attached where needed as a reinforcement. Early battalions had mixed compositions with Panzer III tanks, but by 1944 they became fully equipped with Tigers. A standard battalion consisted of 45 tanks, 3 companies with 14 tanks each, plus 3 in headquarters. It also included recovery vehicles, Bergepanther, tractors, support vehicles, and anti-aircraft assets. These battalions were assigned at corps level and used either as a concentrated force or split into companies to support infantry, panzer, or mechanized units. Elite formations such as Grossdeutschland and SS divisions also fielded Tiger companies. Crew training was centralized in the 500th Training Battalion. In practice, Tigers were used as fire brigades, rapidly deployed to critical sectors to destroy enemy armor, stabilize the front, or reinforce key attacks. The Tiger, at the time of its introduction, was the most powerful tank in the world in terms of overall combat characteristics. However, any large-scale war is battle of economies. Victory goes not to the most powerful machine, but to the one that is suitable for mass production, easy to maintain, and quickly replaceable, a true workhorse. In the Wehrmacht, this role was fulfilled by the Panzer IV, in the USSR by the T-34, and in the USA by the Sherman, but not the Tiger. Despite its firepower, the Tiger was extremely expensive and highly complex in maintenance and repair, with relatively low reliability, a problem also shared by the Panther, the best tank of the Reich in my opinion, which I discussed in a previous video. However, as mentioned earlier, the Panther was only 10 to 30% more expensive than the Panzer IV in terms of cost and labor, while the Tiger was 100 to 200% more expensive. In other words, German industry could produce either one Tiger or two Panthers or three Panzer IVs for the same resources. In practice, quantity matters. Even if the tanks are not the most powerful individually, large numbers compensate. This was clearly demonstrated by the USSR, which produced over 55,000 T-34 tanks of all variants during the war. At the same time, two Panthers on the battlefield could be as effective, or even more effective, than three Panzer IVs, whereas one Tiger produced for the same cost would inflict less total damage on the enemy. This was evident at the Battle of Kursk, the largest tank battle in history. The Tigers performed well, very well, but they were too few to influence the outcome. The result was a crushing German defeat, second only to Stalingrad. If, instead of the same number of Tigers, there had been twice as many Panthers, the Wehrmacht would likely have had better chances. Of course, the Panther only appeared in 1943, about half a year after the Tiger. So in 1942, the Panzerwaffe had limited alternatives. However, the real choice existed earlier, at the design stage. If the Tiger program had been canceled years earlier as a dead-end project, and all resources redirected to the VK30.02 program, the Reich could have fielded the Panther before August 1942. Most likely, this would not have eliminated the Panther's early reliability issues, nor would it have changed the overall outcome of the war, which was lost at the systemic level. When the socialist USSR, with its planned and centralized economy, managed resources much more efficiently. However, this could have prolonged the war for several years, prolonging the death throes of the Nazi Reich. This is precisely why I consider the undoubtedly powerful Tiger a mistake, weakening Germany. Germany should have concentrated on producing the Panzer IV, Stug 3 and 4, and later the Panther, while maintaining production of the Panzer IV. However, this was impossible due to the very structure of German industry, which was run by the private sector, whose primary focus was not winning the war, but maximizing profits from defense contracts and lobbying for its own interests. It was precisely these internal contradictions that led to the collapse of the Nazi regime, and no amount of Wunderwaffe could have saved them, even in theory. That concludes today's overview. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. I'm interested in reading them and discussing the topic with you. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like. It helps me as a creator. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.